give you a little background. I have a kind of an unorthodox background that sort of like brings it all together. I actually started off not as a scientist, but as a goat herder. My parents are Macedonian goat herders, and from Greece, I went back and spent a couple of years herding 2,000 goats to the Macedonian Albanian borders down to Mount Olympus. And then from there, I then came back to the States, and I was trained as a painter and a sculptor, studying under some quite renowned artists. I took some time. I was in the Olympics in 1980 as a 400-meter runner. And then from there, I went and worked for Time Inc. as a journalist and did over 100 covers for Life in a series of the magazines. And then from there, I went into science, and I became an associate professor of medicine and chief of scientific visualization at Yale, where my job was to write most of the algorithms and code to do virtual surgery in preparation for the astronauts going into deep space flight so they could be cut in robotic pods. It's the typical career path of a Macedonian goat herder to a multidimensional algorithmic programmer, but I'll sort of tie some of this stuff together again. But one of the things that of course, in many of these kinds of experiences, what gave me tremendous appreciation for was the power of story, the beauty of art, and the importance of technology. Part of the reason is that you start to look at, I'm now in the world of health, and you take a look at health information, and it's all hyperlinked text data. It's relatively boring and very difficult. I mean, you go from link to link to link to link. And then when we talk about health, we also talk about it from a statistical perspective. But as I say, no one's life has ever been changed by a pie chart. And what happens is that when I look at all these statistics, and of course in our databases we have 150 terabytes of hard disk space dedicated to people's bodies, of where we scan their bodies and look at them. And one of the things is that everyone is just sort of a representative of X, Y, Z coordinates. But each one of those people have a story. They have a mother, a father. We're doing a number of projects in children's hospitals. And when you ride the elevator with these parents, the apprehension is palpable. Not knowing what you have is just a horrible thing. And so the thing is that what we wanted to do when I was at Yale, what we realized is that we were actually looking at some of these extraordinary disease processes using new technologies that had never been seen before. So I took my technology, went to New York City, and created a company to actually expand the development of the technology. And we now we're the premier scientific visualization company pretty much in the world, and also have the largest database of human data in multi-dimension. With this data, we decided that we would create a website that would transform health information online by taking it from text-based information to visual, where we would use real information and then tell elegant, simple stories that would help you to understand, one, the causes, the consequences, and the solutions to conditions that you may have. Some of it has to do with Marvel, some of it has to do with conditions of which you need to act on. I'll give you a typical example of a program that we just did on hypertension. And we start off always with an elegant, simple video in HD.
High blood pressure, or what we call hypertension, is a condition where every time the heart pumps, it pumps out blood at a much more forceful pressure than it otherwise would.
Hypertension affects 1/3 of the adult population and is a major risk factor for many other diseases. It's known as a silent killer because it often occurs without any major symptoms or warning signs until a more serious problem arises.
Of all the things that age us, high blood pressure is the most important. Now that's stunning to most people, because who would think a little bit of extra blood pressure in your arteries would make a difference? Here's why it makes a difference. Your arteries are only designed to withstand a certain pressure.
Every time that heart beats, that wave of energy accelerates out of the heart, and it just batters the blood vessels. And really what it comes down to is that battering is what tears them up. It tears up the lining of the vessels.
The damage to blood vessels as a result of hypertension can lead to a vast array of health crises, including atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries, which causes a decreased blood flow to the heart and the rest of the body. The damaged blood vessels, the increased blood pressure, and the decreased blood flow force your heart to pump harder to move your blood. The heart can become strained and enlarged, or patients can suffer angina, a heart attack, or heart failure. Hypertension can cause eye damage, including blindness, because the small vessels in the eyes can rupture or burst from the increased blood pressure. It's also the leading cause of chronic kidney disease and stroke.
After I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, the doctors were really concerned. You know, they told me, I remember an Army doctor looking me right in the eye and saying, you could have a stroke today.
History of hypertension, high blood pressure? Or
Getting your blood pressure checked regularly and keeping an eye on the levels are the first steps to avoiding more severe consequences. An optimal blood pressure reading is 120/80 or below. The first number measures the pressure in your arteries when your heart beats, called systolic pressure. The second number measures the pressure in your arteries between beats, or diastolic pressure. Doctors agree there is no good kind of high blood pressure, and even a few millimeters of mercury above normal greatly increases your risk for a more serious condition, like a stroke.
Hey, it's up there, Mr. Eugene. We just really want to get those numbers down. And it's a matter of just really making sure that they're dieting, exercising, and taking their medications, whether that's 1, 2, or 3 medicines.
These days, doctors often use a combination of medications tailored to the patient, and the medications have come a long way.
10, 15 years ago, you took a blood pressure pill, you were tired, you were fatigued, you got depressed, you couldn't function. That's not necessarily true today. Blood pressure pills today can treat blood pressure very well with minimal side effects.
Whether it's with the help of modern medicine, or through a healthy, low-salt diet and exercise, or a combination of all these approaches, treating and preventing high blood pressure is crucial.
If you have high blood pressure, make sure your blood pressure is treated. They call it the silent killer for a reason.
I learned that I've got to take care of this. And the best thing about it is that it's easy to take care of. And now that I have my high blood pressure controlled, there's no downsides. I can live my life completely without limits.
So you start off with a very simple, elegant 3-minute video, a linear narrative that everybody loves, you know, very simple to understand. But one of the things that we wanted to do was then to create a kind of a deeper dig. And what we did is that we based it on the old Life magazine. One of the things about, you know, everyone sort of looks down on traditional media, but Life magazine was relevant for 3 decades as the most important way that you would get your information globally. And the thing is that it was relevant information, it was beautiful pictures, captions, was easy to get through. And if you wanted to do the deeper dig on the read, you could do that. So one of the things that we've done is that, let's consider that each one of these is kind of like a double page of a magazine. And instead of just having kind of like a point picture, you can actually click on it and get up a double page. Here we're looking at the consequences of hypertension to the eye. Here you're looking at the consequences of an enlarged heart. Each one of these is, if you were to try to read reams and reams of text of what a stage 5 kidney looks like just before you're going into transplantation versus a healthy kidney, these are the kinds of things that help people to understand very, very quickly a healthy brain, an ischemic stroke where there's a blockage, a hemorrhagic stroke where basically there's a bleed in the brain. This kind of information is absolutely critical for someone to sort of really understand what the possibilities are for them. In reality, you take a look at something like this, where when you're born, you're given this, you know, this pristine cardiovascular system where, you know, spring water is running through your veins, and then, of course, your parents screw you up, and then the rest of your life you do it yourself. But if, in essence, you were to, you know, as Dean was, you know, discussing this morning, if you would actually control this and compress morbidity issue, where you could, at the age of 75, still have vital vessels. They would age, but they would still be vital as you would be. And these are the kinds of things that we wanted to bring to light with a kind of a new interactive website where you can go down, do deeper digs on the reads, and also have links to the most important areas. Once you start looking at information this way, you will never go back and reading a link to a link to a link, because this kind of visual realization of how this information sort of is pertinent to you, it is your body, makes all the difference in the world. But we're also approaching this from a point of view of how do we actually, you know, affect wellness. We're launching one of the biggest health events ever created. It's going to be a reversible obesity and wellness in 2011, where we're implementing what we call the 9 rules of wellness. Now, I'm not a big fan of rules, as you can see from my past, but, you know, it always reminds me of, you know, Mel Brooks, The History of the World, Part 1. He comes down as Moses, I have these 15 commandments. I have these 10 commandments. You know? Sometimes I think rules are that arbitrary. But we need something to guide us. And what we did is we chose rules that we really felt that a physician could implement because people are not, I mean, a lot of times we're talking about the cardiovascular system, but we've been doing a lot of research recently on depression and stress. And one of the things we just did, the highest resolution, we just scanned the highest resolution neuron ever created. And what was happening is that we were watching what happens to these neurons when they're stressed through chronic stress or depression. And what happens is that this perfect dendritic, these dendritic ends, which are the branches of every one of your neurons, has thousands of these of which to communicate. And every time you breathe, you smell, you touch, you hear, these things are making better and better connections. And what happens through chronic stress, corticosteroids just erodes them. So the smaller ones will erode by up to 30%. It's extraordinary as to what kind of destructions that we are doing to our bodies, not only on the cardiovascular levels. This is what happens to an unhealthy, chronically stressed brain after a period of time. It just shrinks, and the fluids, the normal fluids here, will just sort of fill up the center of the brain. And on, you take a look at how we're destroying our body in relationship, again, to obesity. This is a non-alcoholic fatty liver. Each and every one of these, we are made to grow in a certain way with a certain fundamental respect for the body. If you take a look at, basically the first couple of days of life, your stomach is the size of a chickpea, and then it goes on to the size of a grape, and as it elevates. And as we go on in life, what's happened is, here's a stomach. There are all these kinds of connections between the stomach and the brain that are saying, I'm sated, I don't need anymore. Once you expand that beyond a capacity, there is no communication any longer. Basically, you have destroyed a communicative pathway that is there to protect you. So our job is to create kinds of informations that hit home and make this understandable, because the consequences are enormous. I will show you on one of the projects that we are doing in the category of obesity, just to give you a very short and clear view of how consequential this is.
In the last 25 years, obesity in America has doubled. 1/3 of America is obese. That's about 60 million people.
About 15% of our children are obese. And the number is steadily growing.
The CDC just declared obesity as dangerous as smoking.
We are obsessive.
We are obsessed.
And we're paying the price.
Obese patients do not live very long.
Each year, obesity causes at least 300,000 deaths in the U.S. alone.
Americans spend well over $100 billion every year on obesity-related health care.
There are a lot of people who are having heart attacks, despite all the efforts we've made to educate people about the ravages of obesity.
We know we eat too much junk.
And we just eat too much.
And we don't exercise like we should.
But what is actually going on inside our bodies that makes us fat?
With real human data,
cutting-edge medical information,
and state-of-the-art technology,
we now have a whole new insight to obesity and the toll it takes on our body.
From our expanding waistline, right down to the cellular level.
Shortly after eating, the circulatory system is already delivering vital nutrients and energy to the cells of your body.
These nutrients are so small, you would have to be the size of a red blood cell in order to see them.
When our cells have more energy than they need, our body stores those nutrients. Immature fat cells begin absorbing this biological energy and transform into mature fat cells.
The longer our body is supplied with excess nutrients, the larger these cells become. As more and more are transformed, what was once just a tiny cell is now a massive tissue, altering not just our physical appearance, but our physiological health.
We all know being obese can cause heart disease.
But that's just part of the story.
Excess fat demands extra blood. 75% of hypertension cases are caused by obesity.
Obesity is the leading cause of diabetes. 90% of people with type 2 diabetes are overweight or obese.
Obese people are 3 to 4 times more likely to develop chronic kidney disease. and 15% of all chronic kidney disease is caused by
Obesity can lead to infertility and double your chances for miscarriage.
Also, obese women are more likely to die giving birth.
Obese men have a 30% higher chance of impotence.
And 8 out of 10 men with erectile dysfunction are overweight.
Being only 10 pounds overweight increases the force on your knee by 30 to 60 pounds with each step.
Obese men double their chances of having a stroke.
Being obese also increases your chances of arthritis,
Asthma,
GERD,
sleep apnea,
gallstones,
back disorders,
breast cancer,
endometrial cancer,
cancer of the esophagus,
colorectal cancer,
kidney cancer,
eye damage,
dementia.
Alzheimer's disease.
Obesity is an epidemic that's not just a matter of how good we look in the mirror.
But truly a matter of life and death.
What are we going to do?
Yeah, you know, what are we going to do? Problem is that in this room alone, there is enough power, money, and connections to completely reverse this trend. The problem is that we're all siloed. You know, when you talk to pharmaceutical companies, you talk to media companies, everyone feels like they can do a story, things like that. But we intend to become the epicenter for everybody who wants to do an initiative, but fundamentally always feels like, you know, it's just going to be a drop in the bucket. But we can collectively make a completely, you know, a change in this. Now, I'm not naive to think that basically everyone's going to change. I think that basically there are about 15% of the population wants to change, but they just don't know how to do it. So we are providing tools for people to do this in the sense that we have already done these programs. Mark Laponis, who will speak later today or tomorrow, is the head of medicine at Canyon Ranch. And this fellow here, who I'd encourage you to go on our site and see, he is a member of the lyricist for the Grateful Dead, you know, sex, drugs, rock and roll, just basically kicked the hell out of his body. He was going to be dead in about 6 months. So Mark and I took him and scanned every part of his body and put him through a program where he was 56 years old and his biomarkers were 80. And in 4 months, we got him off of all his meds and reversed his biomarkers. So in 4 months, he was 51 years old. Complete transformation. We've just done it with 6 new people, and we're about to do it with 12. And these tools that we're building, that we're going to be releasing on, in January 2011, are going to be available to everyone. Because the thing is that I can inspire you to make the change, but then you have to become your own inspirational story. I can give you statistics about yourself, but the problem is the statistics are soulless. Really, it's story that gives a soul to data. And so we have to become the embodiment of our own, you know, pathway back to health. We're going to build the information, we're going to build the tools, and there are many people in this audience who I encourage you to come and speak to me because we are looking for great partners. We can do this. It is absolutely possible. And I hope next year I'll have the opportunity to present you to all the results at the same time this year. Thank you.